So you've got somewhere that you have to go. And in order to get to your destination, the pathway leads to a very thick forest. And when you get to the edge of that forest, there's a trail that goes this way. There's a trail that goes that way, 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 every single direction that you can think of. And you've got to get to your destination in like 10 minutes. And you're really beginning to feel the pressure of getting to that destination. And there's somebody that's there with you. And neither one of you really seems to know the direction. But you've got to make up your mind one way or the other. So you can't make up your mind because you're not really certain. So then you turn to the other person. They can't make up their mind because they're not really certain. Eventually you find yourself in a position where you're getting into an argument over which direction you should go in, when really, it really boils down to it, neither one of you really seems to know, right? But you're taking all of this pent-up frustration at feeling the pressure at needing to get to that particular destination, not being able to figure it out yourself, feeling that somehow you might, need to, and feeling incapable, feeling frustrated, feeling a lack of confidence, but not wanting to be in a position where you're portraying any of those. So you can't deal with all those things that are going on inside of you, and you project it onto the other person. And the other person on their side, they project it back onto you, right? You might be dealing with a situation like this, most especially from about the 11th of September until the 10th of October. So where it involves another person. When we can't deliver, that's the phrase I want to use, when we can't deliver what it is that we feel that we need to deliver, we begin to feel insecure. We begin to feel upset in that capacity. Now, what's beginning to happen is between the 11th of September and the 10th of October, Mars is once again going to be approaching its conjunction with Ketu. Okay, and this is going to be at its most intensive when these two planets are crossing each other and when they're within a very sharp degree of orb that will practically make them in the same Navamsha. And that's going to be happening between the 23rd of September and the 2nd of October. Those two planets, pardon me, there's something flying in front of me there, are going to be in very close conjunction with each other. So why the frustration with the other person? Okay. All right. Well, first of all, let's talk about Mars. Mars is a Kshatriya planet. Okay. Kshatriya planets have a need to be noble. They're warriors, right? And so when one's nobility or one's confidence is impacted, Mars is an assertive planet, and so then it begins to become very assertive. At the same time that this aspect is coming on, we have to remember that Ketu and Mars closing in on proximity to each other are going to be directly opposite, Mars in Ashadha Nakshatra, which can cause things to flare up, which can cause individuals to lash out at each other, right? But if we're careful, and rather than using that energy destructively, which might be engaging in a frustrating argument with somebody when you don't really know so well yourself, if instead we look at it to go, right, I'm going to explore all these different options that are confusing me, right? I'm going to take my time with this decision, even though I don't really feel like I can take my time with this decision. I'm going to try to honor both of those impulses of feeling rushed and feeling pressured and feeling like I have to do something quickly, but equally recognizing that if I do something too quickly, I'm going to muss things up more than you might imagine. So I'm going to kind of balance those things out in the equation and use this energy of Mars opposing Rahu as that's going on to take me more deeply into the scenario, to peel away the layers of all the things that I haven't been able to see up until now, and see if I can really figure out which is the clearest trail forward. Now, I want to go a little bit more deeply into that suppression concept. Ketu is a planet that points in the direction of where we have a need, I should probably voice it like that, a need to feel most secure. And it also denotes the types of ways in which we will approach this level of security. Okay? So we need to feel secure. Well, when we need to feel secure, we generally tend to err on the side of the tried and tested methods rather than plunging deep into that forest and just taking an exploration into the deep unknown. Instead, we tend to go, I'm going to be hesitant. I'm going to stay back here. I'm not sure which path it's in. So rather than take any action at all, I'm just going to stay here in a space of inaction. But even that is action on a certain level. But, coming back to that, there's a tendency to err on the side of safety when it comes to Ketu. But Mars is also a very passionate energy. And equally with Ketu, even though we may err on the side of what we think is going to be the safest, Ketu represents incompletion. And so it then tends to show us that what we thought was going to be safe may not be safe at all. Because, I'm recognizing that in a few minutes, I've got to get to my destination. And here I am still at the entrance to that forest. And I have yet to commit to a particular direction at all. But I've got to commit to a direction because if I don't, I'm not going to get to my destination. And so what ends up happening with that particular push-pull energy is Mars gets bottled up in its energy because it's holding itself back when it feels like it needs to move forward. And then when it can't handle that feeling of being held back anymore, it then explodes, right? And those areas that it explodes in, especially as we're dealing with Rahu and Ashlesha directly across from it, it can cause our sensitivities to get set off. We may hear something that is said by one person when they don't really mean one specific thing. We interpret it as meaning something that we're really sensitive about, right? And so, for instance, we're at that entrance to the forest and the person that we're there with goes, can't figure out which way to go. And we go, what do you mean I can't figure out which way to go? I know which way to go. I'm just, waiting for you to decide which way to go. And then we get into this huge, explosion about it. And really what that person meant was that they couldn't figure out the way to go. But you take it as you can't figure out the way to go. So sensitivities are more likely to get set off in this period. Sravana Nakshatra, it can be a very sensitive nakshatra. Also being connected to the ears, there's a whole tendency to think we're hearing one thing and we're not really seeing clearly what it is that we need to understand. And based upon that information, there can be a tendency then to strike out. So on a certain level, you have to begin to move down one particular path. And you have to commit to one particular path. Probably between the 23rd of September and the 2nd of October, you're going to become clearer on that. The way will become more defined. It's not going to be perfectly defined, though. There's still some uncertainty. There's still some lack of trust in oneself. And very quickly, that lack of trust in self can turn into lack of trust in another. But have the decency to take a look at the fact that lack of trust in yourself is really lack of trust in yourself. And that may be something that you have to confront within. But about this time, the Sun and Mercury are going to be conjuncting each other, which is, happens quite often. Based upon their position in the sky, they're going to interact with those energies between Ketu and Mars, basically by Rashi aspect at that particular time. And it's going to bring some clarity. It's going to make things more lucid. but you still have to have the confidence to make that decision, right? You still have to have the confidence. You may be prone at that particular time to try to control the situation, to try to dominate and go, well, it has to be this way, even if the other person is unsure of whether or not you're going the right way. In the end, it boils down to which direction is best for you and which direction is best for them. Sometimes paths have to diverge. But if you're standing at the edge of that forest, and of course, right, this is just a hypothetical forest. It's a decision that you have to make and that you're feeling pressured about. But all paths seem to lead in a direction that you can't figure out which way they're going. So what you have to do is you have to commit to one path. Maybe as you go along that one path, there's a twist and there's a turn. That can take you onto the other path. Know that you can change paths. Know that you can change paths along the way. But sometime along this period of time, you're going to need to find yourself getting confident in making a choice one way or the other. And if you're not confident in making that choice, well, you're going to have to make that choice anyway. But I would say between the 11th and the 23rd, there's some time for deliberation. It may not feel like it. It may not feel like it. That tension may still be there. You may feel rushed and you may feel pressured. But if you don't have the answer by the 23rd, trust that something is going to come between the 23rd and the 2nd that will point in a specific direction. That specific direction is the direction that you need to begin some motion in. If you could use a little bit of help with this particular scenario, I should mention that I do offer several different levels of astrological service, all of which are available through the astrological services page of my website. If you'd like to book a consultation with me, you can do so through the link above. That's going to do it for this look at Mars's conjunction with Ketu, once again in Sravana Nakshatra. This time, and I did an earlier video on this, that's why I'm saying this time between the 11th of September and the 10th of October 2018. Until next time, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.